Welcome into this segment of Behind the Pen presented by mostvaluablepodcast.com. If you want to listen to the full podcast, go to blogtalkradio.com/mostvaluablepodcast. Also, we're on iTunes, so check us out there as well. Thank you all for listening as always, and enjoy the show.
But Dave, let's move into topic number 2. And you know what? Before we start the topic, I gotta let you have the one thing I forgot to let you do last topic is who would you hope to be at 16, Dave?
Oh, thank you.
You mentioned
so
while we were in between these for the YouTube recording that I got to mention Donovan Mitchell and you did.
If there's a guy who falls, and I'm hopeful, it would probably be OG. Obviously, we don't know a ton about his health coming off that injury, but it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if he falls to us, absolutely take him. Absolutely. Just the potential, the upside, as long as he can return to close to what he was before injury, worth the risk.
And that was a guy on the Fan-Sided Bulls blog that said if we're going athleticism, that would be one of the guys we could take at 16. But what I want to focus on in this part 2 is away from the draft, more towards free agency, and kind of what's the blueprint for this Bulls team and how do we build around Jimmy Butler? We mentioned in the draft part and part 1. If you're just joining us on YouTube, make sure to check out part 1 on the YouTube channel. We talked about Jimmy Butler. He's only got basically 2 years left with the Bulls. He won't take his player option because he'll want to cash in on the big money that he'll be getting with the cap, how it's been going up ever since he's been on this contract. Really, I'll ask you, if you're Gar Foreman, how do we build around Jimmy Butler? What do we have to do for this year and for the future?
It's a tough case because to build around Jimmy Butler is also to build around who is your coach as well, because your coach has a system for the player. Usually it doesn't work the other way around unless you're an absolute superstar like LeBron James, where you are the coach as well. So with Jimmy,
the GM and the owner.
Yeah, with Jimmy, you're playing under Hoiberg at the moment. And Hoiberg's system is, we mentioned this earlier, it was heavily reliant on the 3-ball and passing the ball, all about the movement. Fine, we can work with that at the NBA level. We watch how successful it can be with the right assets on your team. Jimmy Butler is unfortunately not like a prototypical guy you want. He's not a point forward for you. He is still he's still super valuable, but it's one of those things where he's good at a lot of things, but he doesn't really excel at passing the ball out while driving to the hole. So you're not going to get those kickouts like you expect. The one thing with him for me is more like if you can bring any semblance of spacing to this team. We really wanted it from the power forward position. We had both Nico and Bobby there. Both of them really failed to be consistent throughout any part of this entire year. So, I mean, you're at a whiff there. You have Robin Lopez down in the low post. Solid guy. No trouble there. But then you end up in the backcourt and you're at a question mark. And that's honestly, for me, the way you build around Jimmy Butler is to get him a point guard of the future, someone he can be matched up with and get that synergy going on, because it does take a little bit of time to get used to new guys on a team. So, I mean, if it really is Rondo, if Rondo is our long-term solution, I'm okay with that. I can just be like, sure, fine, let's do it. Let's let it roll. But then Dwayne Wade obviously isn't. So it's next steps there.
And that was interesting because there is an article on ESPN that's saying, well, there are 2 that I was going to bring up. The first one was from last week where apparently Jimmy Butler, it had happened a month ago, but they're just finalizing it now where he is signing a new agent. He now has an agent and isn't by himself anymore. Everyone, the Tribune reported that, and everyone was like, oh, well, does this mean that he's gearing up to leave the Bulls or start negotiations for that new contract? And then also an article with D. Wade where apparently he met with Gar Pax, had a very positive meeting about the future of the Bulls for this next season and what the roster is going to look like, because D. Wade has until June 27th to decide whether he's going to take that $23.8 million option and just kind of weigh out what the roster is going to look like. So it looks like D. Wade's going to take that option.
I mean, who's going to turn down that much money?
Who's going to pay him that much?
No one else.
Because if he wants to go play with his buddy LeBron in Cleveland, they got to, A, we're going to talk about that, get some cap room, and B, he's not going to make nearly that much money anywhere that he goes. And then with Rondo, it's kind of an interesting situation because we can pay him the just over $13 million for this year, but because it's not guaranteed, we could just pay him $3,000 and let him walk if we wanted to. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I see the last 2 games, although it's just 2 games he played for us.
Rondo's it was the last month.
No, but
give
I'm
the man
saying
credit.
Those last 2, that's when the hype really went up for Rondo, where it's like when we were,
sure, for casual fans.
and when everyone
he was doing something different the last month. He was already in playoff mode.
And when everyone was like, "Oh my God, if Rondo wouldn't have got hurt, we would have beat the Celtics."
We would have beat the Cavs.
We would have beat the Cavs too. You're right, Dave. But that really boosted it up. And
it did.
In my mind, especially, I was like, you know what, we're keeping Rondo. The thing I think we need to do for this year is it's interesting because with all the contracts, if Wade accepts his player option and we give Rondo money and also Isaiah Cannon is on a non-guaranteed as well. We either pay him $1.5 million or it would be $3 million. It'd be less. I don't know the exact number, but we'd give him some sort of money and let him walk. We can decide there. But right now, we're looking at just above $80 million of cap. The projected cap is supposed to be at like 101 for this upcoming year. So that gives us around 21 or a little under 21 million to work with. And I know we have 4 restricted free agents on our board, but the thing I look at with this team is I know we got to bring someone in from the draft and we need shooting. And there was one name I looked at. I don't think we're going to get him, but this would be my dream list guy to bring in, and that would be J.J. Redick.
Yeah.
I mean, he would fit. I mean, and if you're saying, well, Ricky, you just said in the last segment, you're going to go Luke Kennard. More shooting would be better, I guess. But
yeah, but I mean,
if we're going Luke Kennard, we might not have to pay for JJ. But I look at these shooting guards that are out there and the ones that are just going to give us shooting. Unless you want to try to bring Kyle Korver back. I mean, we're either going to not be able. Let's be honest, JJ Redick's. We're probably not going to get him because we won't have enough money. And I know there are also rumors that can Jimmy Butler kind of persuade Kyle Lowry to come over and play for the Bulls? I don't think
Zero chance.
I don't think we have enough money to get that high
with Wade
free
under
agency.
contract. I don't know that we go out and drop a ton of money on a shooting guard. I think we get someone serviceable, or you let it roll on. The draft. We'll find out before. Obviously, if we have any faith in Denzel Valentine for the future, if we get another guard in the draft. I mean, otherwise, I could see us going for someone like a Jonathan Simmons. He is a restricted free agent from San Antonio, but we did see a huge amount of hype from him at the end of this year, especially in the playoffs. So someone's going to offer him some money. Why not us? I mean, I'm okay with letting a couple of our restricted free agents walk because, look, Joffrey, none, zero interest. I mean, it was a trash. It was a trash trade. Like we flat out got fleeced in that trade.
We knew he was going to walk though.
Michael Carter Williams, hot dumpster fire. Felicio actually has value, but we're probably not going to have to pay a ton to keep him. And it just comes down to Nico. If someone's going to make an offer that we want to match, or what makes sense for us. So in my mind, I'm like, you know what? I'd like to get someone who has been in a great system, good pedigree. He's a little bit older, which is obviously the biggest knock against him. But I like Simmons. I think that he could be a good fit here in Chicago, coming off that bench, leading that second team in scoring, and he's pretty fearless actually too. So.
And remind me, he's with the Spurs again, right?
Correct.
That's interesting because the guy that I'm looking at a point guard that he's going to get a little bit more money this offseason, also played in the Spurs system, that I would not be upset if we brought him in to be the backup behind Rajon Rondo, and that's Patty Mills. I wouldn't be upset if we brought in Patty Mills as well. I don't know how much we would have to pay him,
right?
But
I mean, Patty is more of a two guard, but still,
he could play the point.
I know
though.
he can. I know.
We only need for this next season. My biggest worry with the point guard is we need someone behind Rondo to obviously play when he's on the bench, but also play if he gets hurt. I do not want another situation where Rondo goes down and the season is shot, or Rondo goes down and our playoff series is shot.
Watching that attempt at a point guard position.
Because I don't care what Boston fans say, Dave, we would have beat them. We would have swept them that series.
No, that's fair. And Patty is a point guard. I'm sorry. He totally is actually a point guard.
Well, he's a scoring guard
first.
because he can shoot threes as well. So it kind of plays to both things we would need. A guy who can shoot from beyond the arc and a guy who can be our backup at point guard.
Yeah, I understand the serious concern of getting a point guard. The problem is, it's like you're not going to... Well, let's just run through the list real quick for me. It's Lowry's not going to come here. That's pretty much guaranteed. Chris Paul's not going to come here.
No, Chris Paul's going to want to get paid.
Yeah, or win a championship.
The only guy
we can't help him with either of those.
The only guys that you're going to get,
Drew Holiday is a mystery, and he's only a mystery because of his injury. Leads to the question of value, and is anyone going to overpay for him, or will he stay where he's at because New Orleans has a chance to have something really interesting with their current setup of two bigs who are just ridiculous.
Well, I mean, I was going to look at anyone below Holiday too.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like Jeff Teague, is Indiana going to try to re-sign him? I know they have the Paul George situation to kind of get through, and he's going to walk at the end. Do you bring Derrick Rose back? How much money is Derrick Rose going to want in the offseason?
Come on.
A guy I also look at, and I know that people are going to say, well, Ricky, we kind of saw what he was during the NBA Finals, but as a backup for 1 year, if you can get him on a 1-year deal, would be Darren Williams. However, I think Darren Williams might try to stay with the Cavs if he can, or go to a team that's going to compete. But what guy that's below the top three of Lowry? Obviously, Steph is a point guard, but he's going to stay with Golden State. And CP3, would you want to look at if you're the Bulls? Because to me, that's the position we need, because we're not going to get it in the draft.
No, and that's fair. Well, we're not going to get out of our first pick. Our second rounder could be a total surprise, and we could get, some outrageous play, but very unlikely. In my mind, I mean, we could shoot for the stars as far as the best of the rest and go with someone like Sean Livingston. I mean, the Warriors have a lot of money that is going to be dedicated to keeping Kevin Durant and Steph Curry there. Livingston could be one of the guys who slips through the cracks. Not saying he will.
So he's going to be like I'm trying to think, not a Harrison Barnes where he gets paid, but more like an Andrew Bogut, where it's like we got to get rid of him to keep the other guys around.
And that's my thought, is he could be one guy who slips through, because I think it's between him and Iguodala. I don't know if they'll keep both unless they both take really friendly contracts, which I wouldn't blame them if they did, because awesome situation over there with the Warriors.
And plus Livingston is a Chicago kid, or a Chicago guy, I should say, at this point.
So, I mean, that would be kind of the interesting one for me, because, he's got that deadly mid-range shot. And, again, playing for a great system, playing around great people, you do kind of soak up that and bring in that pedigree. And I'm sure, walking in the door with a couple of rings on your hand ain't going to look too bad either.
Yeah, a couple rings on the hand into the halls where you see 6 of them hanging from the banner. No, I wouldn't. The thing there would be, like you said, like if I'm Livingston, I look at that team and go, how much you want to pay me? Pay me whatever you want, because I just want a ring. That's the only reason why I kind of looked at Livingston, and I kind of looked past him. Plus, is Livingston a guy that we can lean on to be that pure second point guard?
Oh, yeah.
Because let's be honest, in Golden State, it's kind of been like, use me for whatever you want.
No, I love Livingston. I think he's got a super versatile kit, and I think that, had he not had that horrible injury in his career, like, he'd be a completely different player. But he's learned to adapt really well to what he got, and I honestly think that him leading our second team, wouldn't even question it. I mean, otherwise we're taking stabs at people like Brandon Jennings or, like you said, Derrick Rose, and I absolutely don't want to go down that route. I want to get away from the score-heavy, all about me point guards. Maybe I'm being over vindictive about that, but like, I really
someone
do.
Who's going to be passed first.
I want to be
the ball.
more team ball, get more people involved, because like after watching Rondo and his impact on the young players, his impact on being a true leader on this team, that's a guy with a pedigree who is a pass-first point guard, and it might aggravate the fuck out of you when you're watching him pass up on open shots, because he's going to look for that guy for the pass because he has more faith in them making a shot than he does in himself. Fair. I'll get angry about that a couple times, but the amount of times that you're happy he pulled a pass out of nowhere and someone's wide open for a shot more than makes up for it. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking for a more traditional point guard, a pass-first point guard who can help lead that second unit, who can score when called upon. It's that gimme, 10 and 5 range. That would be pretty happy with that. So honestly, outside of that, it's more question marks, because you could take a flyer on like a Ty Lawson. You could maybe, I mean, there's a lot of guys who are just like, yeah, he could fill in for us for a year, but honestly, I don't feel good. I'd rather go young. Honestly, if I got the chance, go in the draft, Find someone you really like, whether it's someone in the second round or we make some moves to get a younger player. Go find yourself a young point guard who has potential to grow under Rondo.
Well,
to
I
grow
mean, we
with
traded
these guys.
for a young point guard last year. I mentioned him in
I have
part
zero
one,
faith in campaign.
and
Zero.
we saw how that worked out. I'm not saying that every young point guard we bring in is going to be the same.
He was trash in OKC. I don't know why people expected him to not be trash
He
here.
had some flashy dance moves.
Yeah.
Him and Russ danced.
When your
a couple
contribution
times
is sideline dancing with Russell Westbrook, that's not a basketball player I need on my team.
during the pregame when they had their fancy dance moves.
No, I'm all about the youth movement, though.
Does this team look to any other options outside of the guards? And the one that I kind of look at is, and maybe this is just me and feeding into those rumors that you kind of hear out there, is there any way that we like maybe throw a flyer at Taj and say, hey, want to come back? Want to come back, big guy, or are you going to Minnesota?
I mean, I have a feeling like he's not going to want to come back. It's not saying he left on bad terms by any means. You know, we all understood the situation, but it's just a matter of like, what are you coming back for? You know you're not going to win a championship with this current roster. You
Plus,
could get
do
yourself
you fit
in
the system too.
Yeah, you could get yourself in with a team like you said, Minnesota, where we kind of assume because of the Thibodeau connection. And get in on the ground level with a team of rising stars who look like they're absolutely ready to take over the league in the next 3-4 years. So honestly, if I were him, I wouldn't come here. I don't blame him. But we're a big market, so I think like we have some ability to pull in people, but it just comes to the question of like, are we really going to go for a top tier player in free agency? I have very little faith in us pulling the trigger on that.
And that's why when I saw the articles about the Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry connection, that intrigued me because I'm like, you know what? Like, Jimmy Butler's been the guy, like, one of the reasons why I guess D Wade decided to come here was Jimmy was texting him on the phone, like, hey, come to Chicago. Like, Jimmy Butler is different than Derrick Rose. When Melo was doing the whole recruitment thing, and Derrick Rose was like, nah, I don't do that. If you want to come here, come here. If not, we cool. Jimmy Butler's different. Jimmy Butler's the guy, hey, come here, let's win championships. However, we're still on the side of, well, Jimmy, in 2 years, are you going to be like, yeah, I can win here? Or are you going to be like, oh, LA looks pretty good out there. Ooh, Boston looks pretty good. Another team. Are you going to go somewhere else for your brand? Because this is a player league and it's all about getting your brand bigger and bigger.
I mean, don't feel like you're restricted. I totally agree with the... sports. I get these sports is unrational. We get angry when players leave their hometowns or leave the town they're playing in.
That's where we live. Mobility is so free now.
They've earned it.
It like that's how the NBA is now. And I wonder if Kyle Lowry, who last year his contract was at $12 million. Of course, it's going to be a little bit more this year. Is there like I know at the beginning we kind of wrote it off, but I look at that and I think and I go, can Jimmy Butler really persuade him
to take a $20 million contract?
Go away from Toronto and say, this is what we got. And if we're signing Nico, it's going to be a little bit less than 20 because we're going to have to sign Nico.
We could eat luxury tax.
Nico, I guess. But does Jimmy Butler is he able to bring Lowry in? Because if he is... This team changes.
It does.
Because Rondo goes to the 2, can work with the young guys.
Rondo does not. Oh
no, the second point guard.
Yes,
is what I'm
thank
saying.
you.
The backup point guard.
Like Rondo is the shooting guard,
not the shooting guard. The second point guard.
Yeah.
Kyle Lowry's your starting point guard, and that changes our team drastically.
Huge.
And the chemistry between Butler and Lowry when they work together in the USA basketball. They have that together, so that is something that we can use.
And then on top of that, you have D Wade, and that 1 through 3 is looking really good.
It changes things.
The problem is, you have a non-consistent 4 at both, your starter and backup, and then your 5. You have Rolo, solid 5 behind him. Felicia's jury's still out. I mean, he's a good backup player at best.
And this is where I hate the NBA season. And the reason why I hate it is free agency needs to be before the draft. And the reason why is if free agency was before the draft, if Jimmy could get this done, bring in Kyle Lowry, then in the draft the Bulls could address that 4 spot and go, hey, let's go with a Jared Allen. Let's go with a Collins. Let's go with a Leiden or
TJ
Leaf for
yep.
sure that we can address that for, because the Bulls are basically in a rock and a hard place. It's either what we talk about in what we talked about in part one of where do you go? Well, right now we need shooting and a guard. Take this person. But then if Jimmy Butler's able to persuade Lowry to come in, then we would have, if both of us went with let's just say Kennard for argument's sake, then you've got Wade, Kennard, Butler, Rondo, and Lowry all there at the 1, 2, and 3. And Denzel. Like, that is a clogged kind of backcourt. And then it's like, oh, there's Rolo, and then whatever we had, the slop that we have at the 4. Because I like Bobby Portis. When Bobby Portis is on fire, he's amazing, and he's getting the team going. He ain't always. But he's not always on fire.
No.
And that's the problem I have with
And you said there's two real needs for this team, and trying to fill them out in a year where we're not drafting high enough to get those elite point guards in the draft. So it's either take a flyer on a risk, like I said earlier, or we end up with, same old role players, and it's just kind of like we're pushing the cart along. So the other option, and I know this is how do we build around Jimmy Butler?
Please tell me you're going where I think I was going to go before we go to the Cavs.
You got to move Jimmy Butler then,
Do we
right?
trade him? That's exactly where I was going to go. We're going to talk about the Cavs in the last segment. Dave, I was going to ask you, do we trade, to contradict everything this segment's been about, do we just say screw it and move him this offseason?
Let me preface this with, we know the Bulls won't be able to win a championship this year.
Or next year.
Probably next year as well with the current roster.
But can we compete?
Define compete. We can make it to the playoffs, sure.
Okay.
That doesn't do anything for me.
We're not beating the Warriors.
No, we're not beating anyone of consequence. We're not getting
to the Warriors.
So the thing is, it's like, I'm cool with building around Jimmy and just knowing that the fact that, we need to make better contracts in the future for our shooting guard and keep building around that. That's fine. But that means our window is probably 3 years out at least, 4 years in all seriousness, unless we make some really crazy free agency moves. Barring that, if we want to do a rebuild at this point in time, Dwayne Wade's done after this year with the Bulls. We're not going to pay him another $20 million to stay in Chicago. Rajon Rondo, done after this year with the Bulls, unless he wants to stay with the Bulls for some reason. But my mind is he's going to a contender.
Yeah.
So that leaves us with a whole lot of options as far as contracts and money, and as far as players on the board. Like, I honestly think if we could work a deal to get Jimmy Butler out of town and get, whether it's the Celtics for the one and then some, or if it's for, mystery box somewhere else, I just think that the best way to address all of our needs is to go clean slate and build towards, if you have faith in Hoiberg, we're building towards Hoiberg's system with Hoiberg's guys and let him take a legitimate shot at it. And I understand that I don't totally advocate the let's wait out the window, but you have to build up and know your own window. Don't try to avoid the LeBron, Golden State. It's just know your own window. And if we're not going to be able to support Jimmy Butler during his prime, he's 27 now, so we have till he's 32. So we've got 5 years. It's not like urgent to get something done immediately, but if we can put him out there with some guys by year 3, by year 4, we're in great position. If we can't, and we don't have faith in our front office there's no shame in just going, you know what? The best move for our team is to go get some young guys who have potential to be studs in this league again, and we can build around on better contracts and a better time frame that fits for us.
Here's the thing, and this is what it comes down to with the Jimmy Butler trading conversation that you have.
Yep.
The thing that I mentioned earlier, Jimmy Butler is a recruiter. He is a guy that will text guys, be like, hey, what do you think about coming here playing? What era in basketball do we live in? What's everything that people are talking about after this last finals? It's a 2-word term, Dave. Starts with an S. LeBron doesn't think he played for one, but he did in Miami. What
super
era?
Team.
The super team era. Why? Part of me wonders, why trade Jimmy Butler and look at, okay, we can get a younger guy in here. We got Cap coming off. I look at maybe this next year, sign some low guys. Some guys that are like, okay, they're competent. We can get them in and get them out.
Another 35, 41 season.
I would be fine with an 8 seed at the best. I would be fine for one more year to get Wade off the books. to get Rondo off the books. I would like to re-sign him. It just depends on how much we would pay him. And then having a ton of cap to basically go, Jimmy, who do you want us to play? Who do you want us to bring in? We got the cheddar. Who do you want us to go for? We're building this around you.
Yeah, I mean,
you're our guy. Bring in your big three and let's do this. Like that's
assuming
the era
that,
we're in.
There are people who want to come to Chicago at that point because they've just watched us suck for 2 straight years. And you know what? I mean, we're still going to be at that point. You're right. It'll be Jimmy and Robin. Like that's it, unless any of our rookies or first year guys end up sticking around. But everybody's on a reasonably low contract at that point, so we would have a ton of cash in free agency. But I just
look at the names coming off.
We say all this stuff, but I just don't have faith in the front office to pull the trigger on that kind of a move.
We're using logic, and that's something Garpax doesn't do.
Wonder Twin powers.
I think about the names that could that everyone's talking about for the future. The Paul Georges, I'm not even going to say LeBron.
You can say
wouldn't
LeBron
come
James.
here anyways. Like the LeBron James, and I mean the thing and this is going to get us into the Cavs segment. I can know with LeBron is. And it depends on Jimmy's relationship with him. Would Jimmy be able to sway him over, or sway a Paul George over, or sway a big guy over, two of them over to say, come, basically be the D Wade of this Bulls team and say, come play with me. We got tons of cap room here. It's basically, we can come here and with you and me, we can easily run this East. The only problem is, can he get the right guys in the right system, and can Hoiberg be the coach to beat the Warriors? That's the big question.
When your last 2 biggest fish in free agency prior to this year were Carlos Boozer and Paul Gasol, who was 34 at the time, I don't know how much you can pull into your town. And those were on good teams. Like those were legitimately good Chicago Bulls teams who were in the playoffs, who were in the thick, who could go deep. And that's names you pull. You lost the lottery.
Can I ask you this, and this will be the last thing that we do before we move over to the Cavs? Do you think the big free agents are afraid to come here because of the
Jordan?
The Jordan shadow, the Jordan cloud?
I don't know if afraid.
If I fail in, if LeBron came here and failed in the final, if he came to the Bulls, let's say the decision, he came to the Bulls, got to that first finals and lost, we gave him shit for losing that first finals.
I don't know. Him, Bosch, Derrick Rose probably would have been fine.
I know, but let's say everything played out the same it did, but the jerseys were different, how many trade the bum, get him out of town, he's nothing, can't do anything than Jordan?
Wouldn't have mattered.
I mean, he would have got his 2 rings right after because that's what he did right away with the Heat. But
we probably would have been. Yeah.
The way this city is, and maybe we've been spoiled, where in the 90s,
you think?
We went to the finals, and it's like, if we went to the finals,
we won the finals.
Not only were we winning, we weren't going to Game 7.
Yeah.
None of this Game 7 stuff.
I understand. And there is probably part of it where, step in the shoes of a legend, the go to the game, it's hard to do. So I could see someone like LeBron where, up to this point in his career, he's been kind of teetering on that line of this, but now that he's 3-5 in finals, I don't think there's any fear left in him. I think he's just going to go do him. He's going to, whatever situation makes best sense for him, that's fine. So I don't think for everybody that's the case, but I think for some people it might be. It might be a contributor to why they would avoid Chicago. But I think, look, we're the 3rd biggest market in the United States. There's no big concern about that. Summers are hot here. Winters suck, though. Unfortunately, basketball's played during the winter.
Yeah.
So after a game, do you want to go out on, Miami and go out on the beach, or do you want to go in Chicago and be, -12?
Depends on where I can win the ring. That's where I want to go. And right now, that is not Chicago. But we're going to move on to the Cavs situation. Before we do, Bulls fans, let us know down below what you guys think. I mean, we were talking about Jordan at the end. Like Mario Chalmers said in Game of Zones, oh, you do look like Michael Jordan. So let us know what you guys think in the comment section. What do the Bulls need to do in free agency to build around Butler? Or are you on the trade Jimmy Butler train? Let us know down below in the comment section.
Thank you guys for sticking around for this segment of Behind the Pen. If you want more most valuable podcast content, click on the video up above, because I don't know why you wouldn't want to keep listening to our voices every day. But again, guys, thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate you.